And last but not least, Kim Elliott will be our last discussant. Kim is a fellow with the Center for Global Development and author and co-author of numerous books and articles on trade policy and globalization, economic sanctions, and food security. Kim had her own book launch just last year, if I'm not mistaken, with a book called Global Agriculture and the American Farmer, Opportunities for U.S. Leadership. I recommend people to look that up on the CGD website. It considers some of the inconsistencies in U.S. foreign policy and U.S. trade policy, and I think makes some very good points on that in that regard. Kim worked for several years at the Peterson Institute and wrote extensively on trade topics, including a book that was near and dear to my heart, Delivering on Doha, Farm Trade and the Poor, which was actually got when we were negotiating the Doha agreement back in the early 2000s, got a lot of play and got passed around a lot. So Kim, if you would.
Well, thank you, Joe, very much for that introduction. And let's see if I can. I want to join David in congratulating the Joe and Vince and Barry and all of Eric and the other authors of these really valuable volumes. And I think they're going to be really useful resources in future Farm Bill debates. It's all, I enjoyed reading what I was able to get through over the weekend. I think my enthusiasm was somewhat dampened, unlike David was trying. I'm glad he took the optimistic kind of road of the long arc of reform, because I was reading the PowerPoints yesterday and reading some of the reports on the Farm Bill and getting completely depressed all over again. Because it does seem to me like this new Farm Bill, I would probably interpret foreign policy over a long arc as being maybe optimistically 2 steps forward, 1 back. This one seems like at least 2 back and 1 forward, but maybe that's just sort of the immediate reaction. But I was also, before I got the volumes from Joe last week, I was reading Danny Roderick's new book on Straight Talk About Trade, I think it's called, and because I can't find my notes, I don't have the exact quote, but he had a chapter on the political economy of trade and of economics, and the role of vested interest and collective action problems, and how sort of the depressing conclusion, if you take the political economy of trade, and I think of agriculture literally, why do we bother? Because who's going to listen to us? If you take the, collective action problems and rent seeking and vested interest seriously. And then he tries to be optimistic in his book and say, but ideas can make a difference. We can't just sort of fall into this trap of the vested interests are always going to win, so don't bother. Ideas are important, and that's where this book, I think, is a huge contribution and will continue to be. It really is state of the art. It is comprehensive, and it's going to be a great resource over time. Again, having said that, looking at the most recent Farm Bill, it is a pretty depressing sort of where we are now seems to be very much stuck in a rut where where the political economy, where collective action problems that, we have now a very small number of farmers and farm operations, as the book points out, that are collecting the vast majority of all of these subsidies. That makes it very easy for them to organize, to organize resources, to campaign contributions. The way the Senate is set up, favors rural areas over urban areas. And then we also see very clearly in this latest Farm Bill log rolling, which is something that the book, David's book on political economy, deals with very well, how over the years the Farm Bill added the food stamp program and then added conservation programs in order to broaden the network of groups that would lobby in favor of the Farm Bill. And I think we see that where SNAP did not get very strongly restricted, and on the other side, though, you did get these increased subsidies in a whole variety of ways that make no economic sense in terms of payments to farmers. So unfortunately, I think we're still in that sort of political economy trap, and I tried to be optimistic and think, well, what are the forces that have contributed to reform over the years in the past? And unfortunately, I couldn't get much hope there either, because one was the trade negotiations. Joe mentioned the Doha round. Well, that's been basically dead for a decade. So unfortunately, we not only don't have much prospect of new trade rules, we also have, for those of you following trade, the crisis with the appellate body at the WTO, where there are no new appointments, which means at some point next year, we're not going to be able to actually take disputes like Brazil did with the cotton subsidies to the WTO and put some constraints on subsidies through the dispute settlement part of the WTO. So trade doesn't look like much of a constraint. The other major constraint, I think, over the years in some places at some times has been the budget and having to reduce budget outlays. Unfortunately, at least at the current time in where U.S. politics are right now, nobody seems to care about budget deficits anymore either. So hopefully in the discussion, some of you will have some ideas about what are the mechanisms by which we can bring some of these great ideas that are in these two new volumes to actually bear on the policy process. Thanks.